So we, at the beginning of this year, when we were looking what we wanted to do in the budget for the legislative session, had a lot of initiatives. One of them is we want to do something to say thank you to our first responders, the fire, law enforcement, EMTs, who put it on the line for the rest of us, and particularly as we've seen some like law enforcement not always being treated well. We wanted to show Florida stands with you. We appreciate what you're doing, and we proposed as part of our package $1,000 bonuses for every police, law enforcement, and EMT in the state of Florida. And so we were able to get the legislature to approve it. You know how these things work. There's bureaucracy to get everything done. So we're now in a position where we'll finally be able to deliver checks to people to say thank you. And this was the right thing to do anyways. But I think, and the legislature probably passed it the beginning of May, the end of April, and I signed the budget sometime in June, and it was the right thing to do. But then, of course, we saw here in Surfside, towards the end of June, the tragic collapse of Champlain Towers South, and how the folks in this room were there from the beginning, saving lives, helping, and then, of course, looking through all that terrible wreckage to try to find people in the many, many days after. It was a very, very emotional time for a lot of people involved. Obviously, the families. You know, there's tragedy in life, it's terrible, but you just don't think a building collapses in the middle of the night without something happening. So I think there was a shock that the families had, and then just not knowing for sure. I mean, because it was a terrible collapse, but you know, you hope that there would be a lot of people that would be able to be found as the days went on. So that was really agonizing, and I know the men and women who were on that pile, you know, that was the mission, and you guys just would not get off that. You wanted to be there. It was really part of your hearts, and you were doing all you can to stand with those families. So, and I know how tough, because I was here. You know, I was here every day for those first couple weeks, and I know how hard people worked. I know how hard, particularly Task Force 1 and 2 worked. I mean, we were fortunate that as the days went on, we started to get some other folks in Florida to come down. We even got some folks from other states to come down, which we really appreciated it. But make no mistake, the folks in this room, you know, they carried a very, very heavy load. So we thank you for doing that, and we want to recognize you today for your service. This whole incident in Surfside was a big, big gut punch to so many of our communities in Florida. The folks who lived in that tower who passed away, but even the folks that you guys rescued, that's a traumatic experience too that they're going to have to live with the rest of their lives. But the folks that we lost, just a remarkable group of people, some of these best families you've ever seen with so many people, and I think they've had such an impressive influence that you know, it hurts, and it's something that's gonna leave a mark in this community for a long, long time. But as tough as that was, I think the fact that those families can look and say, you guys were there, you did everything you could. I remember being in there. I mean, I know, Ray, you would have to brief the families, and I remember after 48 hours or so, you know, they thought that they would be getting better news, and there was a lot of frustration. And some of them asked me, well, why don't you let the Israelis come in or whatever? And I was like, look, you know, they're doing everything. But then, so we did do that. And Israelis, they're very good at this. They went, they looked, they told the families, you know what, they've done everything we would have done. They've done everything right. They're getting the job done. And so that made the families, I think, feel very good. But I think now people look back and they know that there were no punches pulled on this. This was a full throttle effort. Everything that could have been done was done, and that was obviously at risk to many of your health and safety in this room. So we thank you for doing that, and we think that what we're doing today, we had planned on doing this anyhow. I mean, obviously we had passed it, I had signed it, you were going to get it anyways, and you deserved it. And I know many of you, I mean, I remember when we were doing the senior vaccinations, you know, we did over 15,000 where you'd go into the senior's home and offer vaccinations, particularly for very elderly people. And I have people in Dade Fire and rescue that are doing that, and that's doing that. So there is so much that was done over the last year and a half that we say thank you. But of course, here in Surfside, this was a absolutely tragic event, and something that's going to leave a mark on our state for a long time. But thank you. We're here to say thank you. I think the legislature doing this, when I proposed it, a lot of people were like, well, you know, I don't know if that's going to fly. They answered the call. They did it. And then here we are. Look, you don't get into this business that you guys are in. You know, you're not going to be a billionaire. We know that. I mean, you're putting yourself out. You have a servant's heart. And it's not all about the money, but if we can show a token of appreciation like this, we want to be able to do it. And so we're happy to do that. And we look forward to handing out these checks. We're going to hear from a couple other folks. And I always try to speak before the First Lady because I never want to follow the First Lady. So the First Lady would love to say a few things.
Well, you know, and Governor, I do remember meeting with a lot of the families. It was in this room where we had some of those briefings, and we remember that. But I thought it was just really important, as did the Governor, just to come and say thank you and tell you one quick story. So we're very blessed to live in the Governor's Mansion. And the Governor's Mansion is about 4 or 5 blocks away from a fire station. And we've become very good friends with our firefighter friends. So we take the kids, we walk down there sometimes, we bring cookies, sometimes we eat them when we get there, sometimes we have cookies, we get sugar high, we come back, you know, it's a disaster, that's another story. But we go down there to say thank you. And the kids now, whenever we hear a siren outside the Governor's Mansion, the kids go, "Those are firefighter friends to the rescue." And they really, I mean, it is so impactful, everything that you all have done. And as the Governor said, you really do have a servant's heart. I've had the pleasure and the distinction to sit down with a lot of firefighters to see that, yes, you do have a servant's heart, but a lot of time that comes with an emotional toll that a lot of people do not want to talk about. And it is very hard to sometimes seek help, because one of the things that I have learned is that you don't really want to sometimes reach out to somebody who doesn't have that lived experience, because you want to be able to relate with somebody who has been in your shoes. So we are working very hard with the Department of Children and Families. We're also working with our legislative partners and federal partners to see what funds are available and to see if there are avenues to be able to devote some of those federal block grants to go towards mental health and emotional help for our first responders. So we're just here. Madison is very excited because she wants to fist bump every one of you. But we all, and Mason would want to be here. It would be a little bit too much. Mamie, 16 months, way too much. But we all wanted to say just thank you and God bless you for your service.
Dane Eagle.
I'll be brief. I just really wanted to thank the Governor and the First Lady, the First Family, really. We got a future Governor of Florida here in Madison for coming and making this a priority. The Governor really prioritized this last legislative session, understanding what you all went through during COVID, and especially what you all went through Surfside as well, and our legislature for backing that up. So the Department of Economic Opportunity simply helped in facilitating the Governor's vision and making sure that you all receive the payments you so earnestly deserve, and we look forward to assisting with that. Lieutenant Governor, I believe, is going to read off some names, and as she does, please come up and receive your check from the Governor, and we'll assist with that. But I'll stand aside and just facilitate. Thank you all for what you do.
Where are we doing this at? Right here? So you'll hand it to you.
Well, again, thank you so much. I reiterate what's been said already. Born and raised in South Florida, I know that we have some of the best in the business, and I think the whole world got to see that on full display during Surfside. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that our thoughts and prayers are with City of Hialeah. They lost one of their firefighters a few days ago, firefighter Crisanto Villa, so we will continue to pray for his family. And with that, I will read off your names, and please come on down and grab a check. Well deserved, and God bless you. Ahmed Abu Salah.
Congrats. Thanks for your service.
Arturo Abreu. Melanie Adams. Eduardo Alarcón. David Albert. Gustavo Arellano. Keon Atai. Humberto Albi. Claude Audette. Eric Baum. Ruben Behar.
Getting a lot of presents.
Yes. Keith Bell. Javier Blanco. Robert Cardenas. Our very own Chief Alan Kaminsky.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Chief.
Javier Crespo. George Cruz. Eric De Armas. Scott Dean. Chris Diaz. Alejandro Fernandez. Jason Fernandez. Charles Francois. Thank you, sir. Obed Frometa. Carlos Garcia. Wilbert Hall. Eric Hernandez. Arthur Holmes Jr. Assistant Chief Ray Jadala. William Licea. Robert McGuire. Tracy McGill. Brian Mitchell. Jason Mogari. Grant Musser. Ricky Noel. Brandy Paternoster. Miguel Peralta. Lázaro Pereda. John Rojas. Jeffrey Rouse. Eric Sanchez. Jose Siut. Thank you. Pedro Soto. Ricardo Stevens. Michael Ung. Luis Valeriano. Brandon Webb.
governor's office in the Capitol, so you guys ever in town in Tallahassee, come by, you'll see it there, so. Thank you. Thank you.
Darren Williams. Willie Williams. Carlos Siques. Those were the names that I had of individuals that registered. If there are any of you that did not get your check, come on down and see that guy right there. He's the man with the money.
So, well, one, thank you for your service, and thank you. I think she got a couple patches, and she got a coin.
Yeah,
and
she's
so
not letting me hold the coin.
She's made out quite well. But this is a small token. I mean, obviously, there's so much more that anyone wishes they could do, but we did think it was important to say we thank you. Thank you, not only for what you've done throughout your careers, but particularly when tragedy struck here, just refusing to take no for an answer and doing everything you can. The blood, toil, tears, and sweat that were left on that was real, and it was honestly, as bad as the situation was, when you see people rise to the occasion with like you guys did, you know that there are people out there that are watching out for us, and that will be there to support us. So God bless you for what you've done, and this is well deserved. So take a couple questions. Yes, sir.
Governor DeSantis, can you speak to the rising rates in COVID regarding pediatrics? Have you been in any of the hospitals and seen what's happening there? Because there's a big spike in cases, but a lot of the kids are getting better quickly.
Yeah, so I think it's important because remember last year when we were going for the school year, there was an attempt to try to say you can't do school, it wouldn't be safe. In fact, I got sued to try to close the schools. We won that. We did it. We looked at the data in other countries, even in other parts of the United States, and we knew that in-person schooling was a low-risk environment, and the kids, fortunately, were very low risk, and so we had a school year in person. Man, just think how much worse we'd be off had we not had kids in school. Some of these places that locked them out for over a year, that's going to have long-term consequences for these kids, and it falls on mostly low working class, middle income kids. A lot of the wealthier families, they're like some of these politicians, they want to close schools and then they send their kids to private school in person, which is just crazy. And so there was an attempt to do that. Now there's an attempt to say that the Delta variant has changed a lot with respect to kids. Here's what I can tell you. If you look throughout the entire pandemic, between 1.1 and 1.4% of COVID positive patients in Florida hospitals have been pediatrics. And right now it's 1.3%. So you've not seen a change in the proportion of the young people who end up being admitted. It's also important to know when they talk about COVID positive patients in the hospital, that means anyone that's tested positive. And most are being treated for COVID, of course, but if you go in for a procedure, they're going to test you. They test everyone that walks in, and so if you test positive, you're considered a COVID positive patient, even though you may not be treated for patients. The average throughout hospitals in Florida for that generally, about 25% of the patients are COVID positive but are not being treated for COVID. With pediatrics, it's between 25 and even 40%. The one thing that I think is different from last year to this year with respect to pediatrics is not as much COVID, but RSV. So we've had an RSV wave this year. We had very little last year. Florida, I think, has peaked on that. But that actually, RSV for young kids, I mean, that's much more of a concern than the COVID. So we haven't seen any major change in terms of the percentage of hospitalized COVID positive folks in hospitals that are pediatrics. It's 1.3% of all COVID positive patients are pediatrics, and that has been pretty consistent throughout the entire pandemic.
Excuse me, Governor, just a quick question. There are a lot of major school districts in the state who support having mask mandates in the schools. Can you please talk about why you're opposed to that and why?
So we think it's ultimately the parent's decision. We think that this is something that intimately affects the health and well-being of young kids. We had a whole year to watch how this is developed in Florida and throughout the United States and throughout the world. And I can tell you in Florida, we had school districts that mandated it last year, others that didn't. Same with private and charter. And there was no statistical difference in terms of the cases. There was a study done by Emily Oster at Brown University, looked at New York, Massachusetts, and Florida. They found no correlation to forced masking and differences in cases. But you also have a situation where a lot of parents have come. They've come to me, they've come to the school boards and said, this has been very difficult on their young kids to have to sit there for 8 hours with this. It's not natural. It's never been studied what the effects of that are. You know, NIH has a $42 billion budget. They've not spent a single penny since COVID started studying how these mitigations affect kids. So ultimately, my view is it's a parent's decision. If you believe in the masking during the school, you're free to do it. No one's saying you can't do it. But if you're somebody that is concerned about that, that thinks that that may not be the right thing for your child, then I think you should have the right to make that ultimate decision. And I don't think government should override that. So for me, it's about the parents, and it's about trying to vindicate parents' ability to make these decisions. But I think yesterday, Anthony Fauci said, we don't know whether it's harmful. We hope not. That's where they're at. So they don't really know. So this is a big experiment to have tens of millions of kids, particularly the young kids, that are going to be wearing this all day. The airflow, some of the other things with learning, particularly for younger grades when you're learning phonics and some of that other stuff. So there's a whole host of issues. And my view is clearly the data, if you look at the data, it's totally reasonable for a parent to say, you know what, I'd rather send my kid to school, without wearing the mask. So that's what it's about. It's about parental choice, not government mandate. And I think ultimately parents will be able to exercise the choices that they deem appropriate for their kids. But I would just remind folks, last year during this time, as we're getting ready for school, you had a lot of howling. People said you shouldn't do it, you shouldn't go to school, shouldn't have in-person. As I said, I got sued by the teachers union to close the schools, and we felt very strongly that every parent had the right to send their kid to school in person. We thought it was important for the child's development, that it was important for not just academics, but just being in school and not sitting at home all day. And that was the right thing to do. Now we're in a situation where even the most loudest people from last year, they know trying to say that you shouldn't have schools open. Like that's like a third rail at this point. And so I think something similar is going to happen. We already know that schools have been run. Some schools had no students chose to wear masks in different parts of Florida, and the results were not materially different from there. So that's with all that data. United Kingdom doesn't have masks. Sweden doesn't have masks. Iceland, Netherlands, all those, they've been doing this too. You got to look at that data and look at it. And what that tells me is this is ultimately a personal choice. And look. We can get into the efficacy of this. I mean, it's an aerosolized virus. Is a piece of cloth going to stop? We can get into all that from an engineering perspective. But I can tell you, kindergartners, everyone admits that whatever efficacy a mask would have, you have to wear it fitted properly and tight. Do you honestly think these young kids are doing that? So I don't think it's really doing much. And so as a parent, I think parents should look to say, it's doing more harm than good. And I'd also think, we've talked to students over the last couple months, and what they would say is, hey, my school last year made us all wear masks, and we'd be in masks during school. And then after school, we'd all be hanging out at homes and nobody would be, of course they're not going to do that. And so so you have to ask yourself, what are the potential harms from this? And should parents ultimately be the ones to make the decision? And I think parents should be able to be the ones to make the decision. And if parents choose the mask of some of these young children, that may not be the decision I make, but you know what? I trust them to know their circumstances better than government. But the converse is true as well. If parents are concerned about what that has done, their development, and some of those other issues that have not been investigated the way they should have been, then I think that they should be able to make the decision as well. Thank you, guys. I got to run. We're going to. What we're going to do is we're going to do whatever we can to vindicate the rights of parents. and make sure that parents are in the driver's seat when it comes to the health, education, and welfare of their kids. And these should not be decreed by the government. This should be something that a parent is ultimately making the decision on. And there's different parents that feel differently about it. I respect that, but I think to force one way is alienating and marginalizing a lot of parents throughout the state of Florida. And I think we want to be supporting that. So we'll do what we can to be able to vindicate those rights. But I think ultimately, I think what you'll see is, I think most of the school districts, have not had most of the mask policies expired. I know you've had a couple districts that have done stuff recently, but at the end of the day, giving parent that option, you're free to recommend. You can encourage whatever you want, but I just don't think you can override the rights and the decisions of the parents. Thanks, everybody. I got to go. We're going to do some more today. You guys deserved it, and I can't thank you enough for your great service to the people of Florida. God bless you all.